Hi everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to go over a couple of the projects that we're looking forward to beginning this spring as the weather starts to warm up here at the museum. I'm really happy to announce that we're entering the next phase of our locomotives that are getting ready to be sent into the roundhouse when that starts. The H10 is just about done, and next we're going to start on the L1, which I think is the one that is in the most need of at least some stabilization. I've been getting some questions from people online asking where are we going to put the engines when they're done and why are we painting them if they're just going to sit outside. So we have a fundraiser going that's pretty much done, that we're going to build a roundhouse that the 5 steam locomotives that are out in the yard are going to go in. And I'll make a video coming up that kind of covers which ones are going in, why they're historically important, and where the project stands. But for now, I want to talk about our upcoming spring projects. So the L1 is the next one that's going to be ready for sandblast and paint. And the question is, why are we sandblasting and painting them when they're going to sit outside and the roundhouse isn't ready yet? And the answer is sometimes it's good just to throw paint on things to kind of stabilize them. If it's just bare metal, it's outside rusting. But if it's painted and primed, you don't have to worry as much about the metal underneath deteriorating. So that's kind of our thought process behind that. When the roundhouse is done, even if the engines aren't completely restored, if they have a decent coat of paint on them, they can sit in there for a little bit until we get ready to make sure that everything's good. So I wanted to go over today the 3 projects that we're going to work on this spring and what we're going to do with them. So behind me is the tender to the L1. There were some other questions people asked me that why is the tender to the L1 in front of it? And the reason it is that way is because we have our scaffolding set up to allow our sandblaster and painter to paint these and sandblast them outside. So what we'll do is we'll pull the tender away, do that first, and then we'll pull the engine in. And then afterwards we're going to connect them back together and eventually put them in the roundhouse. Now the L1 520, in my opinion, is one of the most unique engines we have at the museum, and I want to do a whole video on this at some point, but just in a nutshell, this engine actually had a boiler explosion in the 40s, and they originally thought it was a terrorist attack, but it was not. So I think this engine is super important. The Mikados, which is what type of wheel arrangement this is, were really important. If you ever get a chance to read the book Set Up Running, they talk about how these engines kind of revolutionized fast freight back on the Pennsylvania Railroad in like the mid-19-teens, 1920s. So this engine to me is my favorite for a couple of reasons, but this one needs a lot of work on the tender on the inside. And I'm going to start with kind of what our process is to get it ready. Now, we're going to have a college class of welding students come in here that's going to help me do this work. So a lot of what you see here is going to be the same as the H10. We're going to go inside, we're going to clean out the tender, we're going to get a hole in it so we can get stuff in and out, and we're going to remove the screens up front and completely clean the inside of the tender out. Once we do that, then it's going to be ready for sandblast and paint. But unfortunately, this one, just because of the way it was designed, and unfortunately it's been sitting out so long, this one has a couple more unique areas that we're going to have to deal with. Most notably on top of me is the doghouse, and I'm going to do I'll film that in a sec of what that looks like and what it did and what it needs done to it. But first things we're going to start is the students are going to come in and we're actually going to cut a hole on the inside of the tender to allow the sandblaster to get his equipment in. This one underneath had a water scoop that would have allowed water to go in the tender and refill on the fly, but they left all the guts of it on the inside that I'll show when I go inside in a sec, and I can't use that as an access patch like I did, an access door like I did on the H10. So this actually it doesn't have the scoop. They cut the scoop off before when it was in service because they didn't need it anymore, but there's a giant casting inside of where the water would have come up and in, and that's still in there, and I don't want to touch that because I think it's really cool and it definitely deserves to be saved intact. So what we're going to do, so after talking with the Al, which is the head of restoration, and the sandblaster, we decided that the first course of action with the tender we're going to cut the access hole in here. This is where the cab signal equipment would have been when the locomotive was running, which is where the crew of the steam locomotive would have been able to tell what the next block ahead was, if there was a train on it or not, and that equipment was stored here. Inside the tender, there's a bulge from where this goes. So we're going to cut the hole in there so when we weld it in place, you can't see it on the outside. So that's the first project on this we're going to get started. I'm inside the tender of the L1, which I'm going to do a pan behind the camera when I'm done so you can see kind of what I'm dealing with. But this is the inside of the L1 tender. It's a lot different than the H10. It's taller and it doesn't have those pieces in the middle, so we don't have to worry about taking them out, which is nice. This one though needs a lot of work on the inside, and I'm really, really happy that it's finally getting its chance to get painted and blasted. This behind me is the box of the cab signal equipment that I opened on the outside. So this actually extended on the inside of the tender and was added later when cab signals were more in use. We're going to cut a hole, probably right here, to allow everything to get in, and it's also going to let us get all the stuff out, a scale inside the tender. Last summer I started this and I started to clean this up, but I didn't get as far as I'd like. There's a couple spots up here too. This one is a little bit interesting. I believe there's a raccoon living in here. Not right now. When I'm in here, it's probably scared, but I can see remnants of something was in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to patch all those areas where an animal was living in here. And a lot of times with preservation of old equipment, you get that, animals are going to find places to live. They need homes too. And they'll find places like this that they like, that are really secure for them to stay in. But unfortunately, that does more damage to the stuff than good. So we need to evict him or her from this tender. But I'm going to go behind the camera and I'm going to show everybody kind of the main areas we're going to go after. So starting off, I wanted to show everybody, I talked about the water scoop that's still in here. And this is kind of what it looks like if you look all the way up top. So water would have come in and then it would have shot out the top up here. So that's why on the H10, this hole was open. On this one, it's not. This is what it would have looked like. I don't know if the H10 had this or not, but it's interesting. This is the area where we're going to cut the hole. This is the inside of the cab signal box. You can see up front, there's a lot of daylight poking through. We're going to have to address that with some patches. Then up front, you can see the screen, and then you can see more daylight. So all those spots we're going to have to definitely look at and get situated before this can get done. And last but not least, this is the daylight hole for the doghouse. And again, part of that is how it was constructed. Water just laid there, it couldn't leave. So a lot of that was just kind of poor design and they didn't allow drainage for it. Another project that I'm really excited to at least get started is we're going to start a little bit of work on this P53 coach. For all my New York fans, Long Island Railroad specifically, this coach is special. This was the predecessor to the MP54 coach. This is when they started experimenting with steel coaches rather than wooden ones. And while they didn't reproduce this one, it kind of paved the way for the really popular coaches that a lot of people remember. This one needs a little bit of work on the frame and it needs a little bit of work on the step wells. I'm going to actually remove one of the step wells, take it back to another shop. We're going to work on it there, get it fixed up, and then we're going to kind of tackle one at a time, so it won't we're not going to cut off all four. With this one, this is kind of just a little bit of preventative maintenance on this so it doesn't get bad. This is a pretty important coach. Ideally, one day we're going to try to get a roof over it, kind of in the front, which that's going to be exciting. But yeah, we need to make sure that we get to this before it gets too bad. Last but not least, we're going to continue work on our GS-Con, ex-Pennsylvania Railroad. Susquehanna had it at one point. We still have to put the sides on. We're going to fix some patches on the sides, put the ends back on, and just continue work on it. We don't know, with the B6 being inside with all the scaffolding put up, we don't know if we're going to be able to use the crane to put the sides in this year. We might have to wait a little bit, but we are still going to work on this one. All right, so I'm back in the shop. It probably is going to look a lot different from the last time we were here. We have the scaffolding set up so we can start pulling the front smoke box off. We have things to fix on the front. There are a couple holes in it. We have to get ready to pull the smokestack. That's on the list of things to do. Mainly what I've been focusing on is the ash pan. You might have seen a couple of the videos where I started pulling parts off and I fixed some holes and rust holes in the wheel wells. Those are all done, so I'm going to zoom and take a shot of them so everyone can see how they came out. I'm also kind of taking the ash pan apart piece by piece. I have this piece here that I pulled off, I painted, I'm going to put back on, kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. You take all the pieces off, fix all the rust, paint them, abate them, and then put them back on with new hardware. And that's kind of the restoration process in a nutshell. Now obviously there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the gist of what we're doing here. So this is where the most of the work I've been doing the last month has been inside the ash pan. And the reason why the videos have been a little sparse is that it's limited room inside there. I'll take the camera in and show everybody, but since there's limited room in there, I can't really produce a quality video of me fixing small patches and repairing pieces. So I just kind of saved everything for like a big video, and I'm just going to show everybody the updates on them. Now, the thing with the ash pan, and when I go down in, I still have the fireman's side together, and I'll show everybody. There's a lot of like individual little pieces that make up this entire ash pan. Remember, the point of it was to allow the ash to get dropped from the grates into the pan and then down into where the door area is. So there's a lot of like individual pieces that cover holes and make up the whole ash pan in its entirety. So I have these angles here that I have to remake some of these, and I have just like odd shaped pieces that make up this ash pan, that a lot of them are in bad shape. So that's what I've been doing, is making the pieces, fixing the pieces, and just kind of cutting everything out. And now I'm on, at least on the engineer side, I'm at the point where I'm putting my final coat of paint on so I can assemble everything back together. So I'm back under the Locomotive again by the ash pan. This is one of the doors, if you remember from a previous video. And one of the things that I have to do next that's going to take a little bit of time is that we actually want to get the ash pan mechanism working again. So on the side there's a bar that you throw, and when you throw the bar, it opens the doors. Well, right now a lot of it is kind of froze, it's rusted to the point where it won't move anymore, and what we want to do is we want to get it where the mechanism will actually work again. So after I'm done with the interior stuff of getting the whole ash pan done, in terms of welding any holes or fixing any pieces that are completely gone, I'm going to take a torch down here, and I'm actually going to start to free up the linkage so that it'll actually work and move again, which is really cool. And it's neat that we're able to do that stuff just to preserve kind of what it was. So I'm inside the ash pan, and you can kind of see a little bit of the work I've been doing. Up front, you can see there's some new bolts. That's actually a piece that I have completely replaced in it. Let's see if I can get a little bit of a closer look. So this piece was completely rotten away. So I had to weld a new piece, get the bolt holes done, and get that looking good. So that's done. And then with this, there was just a lot of little things. So like down here, there was a patch that needed done. There was a big patch. Let's get my light in focus. There's a big patch here that I had to do. And I've just started on the front. This is actually Locomotive rear. I've just started getting to the point where I can start piecing everything back together on this side. So I have some paint. You can see it's kind of reflective and shiny here. There's my light I'm working on today. This is almost ready for paint. You can see I have my air hammer here to knock the scale off, and I have my die grinder, angle grinder here to get anything else. So when I paint this, before I paint it, I have to make sure that there's no like loose scale. So like this rust I can paint over with a special paint for it. But other than that, this is where I'm at. You can kind of see here, this is what I'm talking about in terms of piece together. So right here, there's a piece of angle that's pretty much gone. And those are the pieces I'm going to have to fix. When I cut them off, I usually blow through them. They're so thin. So that's what a lot of these pieces are held together with, and I have to replace them. The piece in the back that I was painting is the other half of this side here. And you can kind of see what you deal with. So I just removed this bolt, but there's still like residual rust and things around it. So I have to make sure with this that I take the time and knock all that off. Because if you just paint over it, underneath's still bad. So it'll just flake right off and it'll continue to rust. So it's kind of pointless to do that. And then up at the top, yesterday, I started to paint with the special rust paint just underneath the Locomotive. This is all the linkage for the grates. That'll all get painted. So all this stuff is going to be nice when it's done, to the point where it looks presentable and it's not rusting or deteriorating any further, which is our end goal. So that about sums up our January update on where we're at with things on the museum, and then looking forward into spring, what projects we're going to work on here. It's going to be a really exciting time. If you're in the area and want to come check it out, be sure to come check out what we're doing, because you'll actually be able to see different things going on, which is exciting. I'm going to close off with the end of the Locomotive. So this is the rear of the Locomotive, and we have all our scaffolding up. We have a staircase going up to it. because we have to start getting the jacketing ready, and we also have to start rebuilding the entire cab with wood. I have to work on the seats. We're going to redo some of the gauges and things to make it look really good. So that's why we kind of put scaffolding up here long term, because it just makes it easier for us to get in and out. So thank you for joining me. Look forward to the next video and have a good one.